The big question for the 2024 season all of us have is, will the other teams be able to recover the disadvantage accumulated against Red Bull over the winter? In a way, it seems unlikely after a dominant season like that. But fortunately for the fans and the other teams, Red Bull seems to be at the end of their development road and have exposed some tricks to other teams over last season. So, new upgrades for the other teams have started to appear and leak for next year. Stick around to find out which upgrades we can expect from the big teams. After all, these upgrades will be crucial to the success of the event in 2024. The cars will first take the track on February 21st in Bahrain for 3 days of testing. But will these upgrades be enough? There is no clear answer to this question, owing to the fact that it is uncertain how much performance Red Bull carries. However, competitors of the Austrian squad remain optimistic in several areas. There was a lot of component crossover between the first and second seasons of these new regulations, with 19 victories from 22 races, 2 seconds, 12 pole positions, and an average of almost 26 points scored every weekend. These are the stats of Max Verstappen and his RB19, which Christian Horner described as already a piece of history and has given us something simply incredible. A car that, like many others from several teams, reused many components from the previous year's RB18. Parts of the chassis and suspension were the same. The gearbox was exactly that of the RB18. For this reason, I can say that the RB19 probably shares 60% of the parts of the previous year's car, said the team principal. This troubled several other teams, who restored faith in their early concepts while mostly preserving the chassis from the previous season. The most notable examples are Ferrari and Mercedes, with the past world champions once again employing those extremely aggressive technological decisions. These include the hollowed-out chassis for the internal radiator housing and a very advanced driving posture, both of which were part of the failed Zero Pods design. Even the Italian team has not made major changes to the F175 chassis, maintaining the bottom anti-intrusion cone in a fairly high position. Near discourse addressing transmissions was also retained quite close, if not identical to those of the first car developed with the new laws, as in the case of Red Bull. Chassis and gearbox choices have significantly hampered the growth of Ferrari and Mercedes, as well as Alpine, which has a highly bulky and robust chassis. As a result, it's hardly unexpected that the alignment became completely aerodynamic last season. However, due to serious chassis constraints, Ferrari chose not to send 2 aerodynamic kits to the track, which would typically have been worth 3/4 of a second. Mercedes and Alpine were also unable to make as much progress as they would have wanted due to a hefty gearbox in the case of the W14, or an equally huge chassis in the case of the A523. For these reasons, the 2023 season was one of the most uninteresting in recent memory, with essentially little contest for victory each Sunday. There was a significant aerodynamic alignment in 2023. It will concern the less obvious components throughout the cold months. The winter is swiftly approaching, allowing teams to eliminate significant limits that were just a year ago considered opportunities. True, the delay to be made up in the winter is greater than what the 2 Red Bull teams have made up for in 2023, but they did so with cars severely limited by choices that have proven to be incorrect only once the cars have been put on track in Bahrain. All of the teams have learnt a lot about their cars' projects, and it's no accident that many are making significant contributions, particularly to the chassis and gearbox. Ferrari and Mercedes are 2 prime examples. The W15 will feature a lot more conventional chassis and a more compact gearbox. This will also assist Aston Martin in addressing the aerodynamic efficiency issues that plagued both the Brackley car and the AMR 23. The scenario is different at Williams, where the body has very low aerodynamic resistance but no aerodynamic burden. Ferrari is also working on the gearbox, attempting to replicate the qualities that characterize the Red Bull gearbox, which has an incredibly compact section. The benefit of less bulky gearing is the ability to extend the diffuser and so extract more downforce. More load is created as the diffuser expands, and the better the efficiency, given that the floor component is frequently considered as free downforce by technicians. This is due to the fact that the resistance to advancement grows extremely slowly as a function of the aerodynamic load created. Many teams' 2024 cars will feature new ideas, and by concept, we don't always mean the aerodynamic one. There are many more. They will act and drive differently. Like the Ferrari 2024, according to Carlos Sainz, will be a different machine that solved the limitations of the SF23. According to Carlos Sainz, the car behaves differently in the simulator, and we will only know in Bahrain if the new concept we are developing works. In fact, following last season, we saw that all of the cars began to resemble each other in terms of aesthetics. A specific alignment is in the works, and it will impact the less apparent components of an F1 car, those beneath the bodywork, that is the floor. This will uncover significant and exceptional possibilities for many teams. Because of these factors, as well as regulatory and tyre stability, some feel the gap to Red Bull can be closed. Of course, this is dependent on Milton Keynes' development and if their opponents have done their study right. Because as we all know by now, the Red Bull RB19 is one of the most dominating Formula One car in history. But why did the car do so well in terms of technology? And what does the Milton Keynes-based team need to work on before 2024? After a season like this, it seems reasonable to speculate on the RB19's absolute and relative competitiveness. Red Bull's form in 2023 was not the product of a consistently improving idea, thanks to the continued development of the RB19. It had been a successful march from the start of the season, with just Singapore standing in its way. So what was it about the RB19 that other teams couldn't match? Did Red Bull completely realise the promise of the RB19, or did they simply do enough to beat the competition? We all know that stopping cars' development throughout the season is not very realistic, and certainly not practical, unless you are in two diametrically opposed positions. Rather from examining the car's attributes, it becomes preferable to inquire whether the Milton Keynes-based outfit has cut any corners this season. The improvements in aerodynamics and tyre management are obvious, and multiple evidence indicate that Red Bull had already moved its emphasis to 2024 before the summer. Continuing work on a car that is plainly wrongly conceived is simply a waste of time and money. If a car is demonstrably superior to its competitors, it is justified to halt development in the short term. Typically, this is replaced by a series of testing of fresh components that should be included in the next project in order to make the most use of time during the current season. Red Bull took the second route and worked on the car until the summer break, with only a few improvements in the second half of the season. They accomplished this primarily by introducing components at the basic level, foreshadowing the RB20 next year. The RB19 served as the foundation for determining which aspects Red Bull can still enhance. Red Bull has chosen to set up its cars exceptionally low since the Monaco Grand Prix, especially on street circuits. That became obvious when Perez was involved in a car crash in the Principality and had to be removed by a crane. If the secrets of the floor had been revealed on that occasion, it is equally clear that the specific shape of the floor, characterized by large areas of discontinuity in the profile of the Venturi channels, ensured considerable stability of the aerodynamic center of pressure. In turn, the Venturi channels guaranteed that front and rear oscillations were decreased. The suspensions only made one element of the puzzle more effective. Throughout the season, it became evident that it was about the precise geometry and changes, particularly in terms of ride height, and not so much about the front pull rod and rear push rod. In essence, it became evident that Red Bull had found a perfect match between the RB19's dynamic setup and aerodynamics. The suspensions not only mitigate the impacts of front-to-rear downforce fluctuations, but they can also minimize them. In essence, the RB19 appears to have an active mechanical suspension with a well-defined adjustment range. The events in Singapore offered clear evidence of this, and it is totally lawful within the restrictions. In Singapore, it was discovered that any extra changes to the torsion bars and shock absorbers had no influence on the car's conduct. This happened less noticeably in Las Vegas, where the car was less accurate and the technique to approaching and leaving bends was different. Unlike other teams, for example Ferrari, Red Bull had carefully employed unconventional ride heights in Las Vegas. The flawless combination of the car's aerodynamic and dynamic performance, including mechanical grip, adhesive grip, and the grip of the Pirelli tyres, is the RB19's hidden secret. It is almost daring to claim that the edge over the competition was established exactly by evaluating these factors and refining them sufficiently by employing an Italian tool, or rather a combination of instruments. It could be argued that this is the ultimate key to Red Bull's success, but the precise use of Pirelli's MTS laboratory in Milan, which is available to each team subject to change for a total of 8 hours per season, often used in January, would have allowed the adjustments to be fine-tuned. That begins with the tyre load, characteristic angles and drift angles that make the RB19 excellent. The influence of the car's dynamics on the aerodynamic effects is quite substantial. Essentially, the RB19 was distinguished by reduced vertical motions between the front and rear, both as a result of the distribution of the aerodynamic load and the position of the center of pressure, and by the dampening of oscillations as a result of the suspension's particular design. So, will anyone be able to beat that in 2024 with their new improvements? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.